Welcome to the Luke Macias Show. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation are taking great steps to protecting citizens who are entering the workforce. Democrats were finally fined for their departure, their breaking of quorum that happened last year. And Texas lost a serious patriot a couple weeks ago. And today we're going to remember the important work that he did for the state of Texas. Let's get to the show. In Scripture, we talk about the body of Christ, and we hear passages where the church is specifically being told one of the reasons that there is friction among you is that different members of the body are wanting to do different things. Some are the hands, some are the feet, some are the spine, some are the head. Well, if we think of the conservative movement in Texas like a body, we lost one of our most beautiful voices in the conservative movement, Bob Bruce, a dear friend of mine who's been engaged in Texas and national politics for the entirety of the time that I have been engaged in this process. We met several years ago, quite a long time ago, actually, in the midst of a number of battles. And Bob was not just a successful entrepreneur. He was not just a generous philanthropist in his nonprofit advocacy and direct campaign giving. He was not just a delegate to conventions, which he attended often. He is a precinct chairman who actually served his precinct and sent letters out to his precinct telling them how to vote or how he was going to vote in any given election. He's not just a board member of the appraisal district fighting probably one of the things he hated the most in Texas, property taxes. He's somebody who thoroughly was engaged across the board in the conservative movement here in the great state of Texas. Bob graduated high school from Thomas Jefferson High School here in San Antonio in the 60s. He joined the Army for a period of time. He came back to San Antonio and worked at one of our local news stations, but he opened up a recording studio in the 70s. This ended up becoming quite a large studio. He loved marketing. He loved advertising. And not only was he somebody who was entrepreneurial, not only was he somebody who bought and sold various businesses throughout his career, but he had, for those of you who know Bob, one of the most beautiful voices you've ever heard. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But he opened the studio in the 70s, and it was in the late 70s that he went on a flight with a friend of his who had a small airplane. And he tells the story about flying over the city of San Antonio and becoming enthralled or in love with the idea of flying. And so he started the process of getting his private pilot's license. And it was there, getting his license, that he met his wife, Nancy, who was one of the first female pilots, captains for Southwest Airlines. They got married, and he was also hooked on flying. And so it was in the 80s that he bought, early 80s, that he bought 100 acres out in Boerne, Texas, just north of here, about 30 minutes from where I live, bought 100 acres and set up a small airport, built a small airport that he successfully ran for decades before recently selling it. He bought a bowling alley in 2010, which he still owned up until his death just a number of weeks ago. Bob's voice was something that was probably known, but I don't know if it was credited to him as much as the politicians that probably didn't like him knew that it was his voice. But it started at a very early time, before I was even born. In fact, let's just go to a couple ads that featured the voice of Bob Bruce in Texas politics.
Tony Sanchez calls Bill Clinton one of the best presidents this country has ever had. He attended one of Clinton's White House coffees that a Texas newspaper said was political and ethical sleaze and embarrassed the nation. Sanchez opposed the record Bush-Perry tax cuts of '99. He stood with Clinton at the White House, supporting the largest tax hike in history on families, small business, and the elderly, later saying he couldn't remember being there. Texans never trusted Bill Clinton. Can Texans trust Tony Sanchez? A fifth-generation Texas farmer and rancher, Eagle Scout and small businessman, he served his country as an Air Force pilot. Rick Perry, for lieutenant governor, was a leader in the Texas legislature. Rick Perry froze spending, cut his staff 19%, and eliminated hundreds of regulations. Now Rick wants to pass his conservative agenda of safe streets, the best schools, and economic opportunity. Rick Perry, family man, father, conservative. Rick Perry, for lieutenant governor.
I was 8 years old when those ads were cut and displayed to Texans all across the state of Texas. So Bob, as you can see, was somebody who was very involved even in the 80s and the 90s, involved in various battles. What happened as he progressed in his life and he made more money is something that should be modeled by a lot more people. We talk about the model of a man. My dad actually went to a Christian men's conference really early, like early 20s. He was very young in his faith. And at that conference, this gentleman gave a model of a man. And so the first 25 years of his life, he said, was education and training. And the next 25 years of his life was business and babies. And the last 25 years of his life was elder statesman, city father, public servant, somebody who was giving back. Another way of saying this, which is a model that's been used before, is the learner, the earner, and the returner. And Bob, for the last couple decades, has been a returner. He has looked at the state of his life and made a determination that he wanted to give back as much as possible. Anybody who knew Bob knew that he had one of the strongest and most passionate personalities of somebody that you will ever meet. I remember specifically, I was in a room, a private room with him and a number of other people, and there was an elected Republican official there, and they had just passed some property tax reform and relief. And some Republican officials try to stretch just how impactful that property tax reform and relief has been over the years. And so this particular Republican official, who was known and liked by most people in the room, including Bob and myself, said, well, with the latest reform, I think we have fixed your property tax bill. And, this is one of those dinners that people aren't really doing a lot of Q&A. This is not a Tea Party gathering of grassroots activists. But Bob's hand immediately shot up, just immediately shot up. And it kind of caught this individual Republican back because, they had plans to speak on other things. And Bob just stands up and goes, my property taxes have not been fixed. And then there was this back and forth dialogue between the reform that had happened, which Bob admitted, that's good, and that's good, and that's good. But then he continued to go back to, none of those things are going to fix the property tax problem. And it was that passion that drove him to run when the legislature recently created 3 elected positions on the appraisal district. And Bob Bruce ran in Bexar County, a Democrat county, and was elected countywide on our appraisal district. And even then, he was passionately trying to find out the system. I can tell you, as recently as 6 and 9 months ago, he would be calling me and other property tax reform advocates and relief advocates and saying, hey, I have an idea. I'm sitting here. We're in this meeting. This has happened. What if we changed it this way? What if we changed the law to reflect this? He had so many ideas. He wasn't just an activist, as I told you, a precinct chairman, a board member. He was an incredibly generous donor. And truthfully, we don't recognize enough the sacrificial work that people do when they give of their personal finances. I actually went back and had an exchange with Bob on January 30th or 31st of this last year. And he was not doing well. He was ill. He had a number of health challenges here in the last several months of his life. And so he had said, hey, we're 5 weeks out from the election, and I know there's some really important races going on, and I know I'm not doing well, but I still want to engage. Can we sit down and talk about a few races that are really important and where I need to be involved? So I sent him a list of several battles that I knew mattered, and he sent me back a note and just said, I've got some checks here if you want to come by. And I was on a Sunday afternoon, and I did want to see him because I hadn't seen him in a couple months. So I went by and Bob was not looking like his normal self just because of all the health challenges he'd had. But interestingly enough, he had literally just recorded a television ad like that day. In fact, before I continue this story, let's just go to a couple of the more recent ads that Bob did in the last couple of years, because yes, I showed you the ads he did in the late 90s, but I want to talk to you about the fact that even as recently as a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, he was still the voice of many conservative organizations that were holding bad Republicans accountable. Let's go to this ad he did against Dade Phelan.
Republicans across Texas agree it's time for Speaker Dade Phelan to go. His liberal agenda for Texas has gone so far that President Donald Trump and Attorney General Ken Paxton are calling for him to resign. Dade Phelan has promoted radical Democrats into positions of power within the Texas House. Dade Phelan even appointed a pro-BLM activist to the second most powerful position in the House. Stand with President Trump. Stop Dade Phelan.
That is the voice of Bob Bruce. So when I tell you that, yes, some are the hands, some are the feet, some are the hands that write the checks, which also he did, some are the feet that walk the blocks or send the letters, and some are the voices. And Bob was a voice. He had a recording studio in like a little closet in his house, and he would go up there. He would come up with these ads. I'm not the only one who's gotten a call from Bob Bruce. If the opposition had a radio ad playing in San Antonio, he loved listening to the radio, and he'd hear the ad come across the airwaves. He'd call up, they're hitting Mark LaHood, who he really appreciated and respected here in San Antonio. They're hitting Mark DeRazio, my friend, who is his state representative, who he was the precinct chair of. And so he would write his own script. And Bob had a beautiful way with words in the English language. And so he would draft his own script and say, okay, we need to cut this. And if nobody would listen to him, he would just make the radio ad himself. He'd record it. He would take music. He would put it together. He didn't have a PAC. He didn't have an organization. He'd say, this is the ad that needs to go. Either the campaign needs to place it, a PAC needs to place it. I don't know what's going to happen, but by golly, this will respond to that attack I heard just yesterday or the week before. So he was somebody who used that voice in so many ways. In fact, when Sands Casinos just tried to buy a state Senate seat recently this year, Bob again answered the call. Let's go to this ad.
When radical activists disrespected our flag, John Huffman didn't stand up. He took a knee and rallied with them. When parents stood strong against racist woke policies in Texas schools, John Huffman took a knee and stayed silent. When Southlake's DEI office came under fire for pushing CRT, John Huffman didn't stand with us. He took a knee. Texas deserves leaders who stand up, not kneel down to the liberal mob. Say no to kneeling John Huffman.
On February 1st of this year, I went to Bob's house, and he handed me a handful of checks amounting to $20,000 that he was giving towards the final push to help elect conservative lawmakers in the state of Texas. And Bob knew that he wasn't doing well at this time. And he handed me these checks, and he told me these might be the last checks I ever give in politics. We read some scripture together. We prayed together. Nancy, Bob's wife, anybody who knows her knows that you had two matched passions that came together when Nancy and Bob got married in the 80s. And they have just been doing incredible work for the nation and the state of Texas ever since. Nancy was there. We enjoyed some time. And then I left. Bob did pass away a couple weeks ago, and he should be remembered. I've seen multiple people out there posting and talking about Bob who knew him. He is somebody worth acknowledging. Very few people are engaged at the level that Bob engaged. Very, very, very few people. Most individuals pick a lane in the political process. They become a donor and they meet with people. They write some checks. They attend fundraisers. They put their name on as hosts for different things. They raise money from their wealthier friends and their network. And that serves a great purpose in the political process. Some decide to become precinct chairs. Some run for local office. Some use their skill sets in media to further the movement. Very few people are involved in almost everything. Frances Marion Crawford had a quote that I thought of. They fell, but o'er that glorious grave floats free the banner of the cause they died to save. And Bob had a mission in his life. He was missionally focused. In Lutheran theology, we talk a lot about the theology of vocation. And vocation is just another word for calling. Bob had a calling, and he answered the call. Dr. Joseph Warren said, "When your work is done, the next generation will be fired by your example and then exemplify your virtues." And I hope that we as Texans can exemplify the virtues that were lived out by the life of Bob Bruce. Psalm 116 says, "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants." Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants. And what you need to know about Bob, more than his voice, more than his checkbook, more than his service in the Republican Party, is the fact that he knew the God, the creator of the universe. He knew that God sent his son, Jesus Christ, to live a perfect life and die a death he did not deserve, the only one undeserving of death, so that he could defeat death, be raised from the grave, and grant to Bob Bruce life eternal. He had faith in Jesus Christ. It was something he held on to all the way to the end. This happens as people are in those kind of final months of their life, but they become a little more tender, a little softer. And Bob did not lose his passion, but as he became a little softer, he became even more sensitive to the word of the Lord. And I can say that as a personal testimony, having read much scripture with Bob, having prayed many times with Bob over the last couple months. And so I just wanted to take a minute to tell y'all about my friend and this great Texas patriot who we should all be grateful for, who we should know about, and who hopefully we can work to exemplify the virtues that he lived.
Real Texan.
I hope you'll sit down with Texas Scorecard every Sunday as we visit with real Texans who are doing real things to make the Lone Star State shine even brighter. We're going to be talking to activists and politicians, but we're also going to be talking with men and women who are shaping business in Texas and driving for a better culture.
In other news, the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation has taken some great steps in the right direction to protect citizens and the Texas economy, the Texas workforce. Now, TDLR is not an acronym that most Texans would know. I think if I walked into a room of 50 Republican precinct chairs and said, TDLR did that, I don't know that they would know what TDLR stands for, but it's the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And they came on the radar recently because they decided, which is something that I think we all appreciate, that these different licensed positions, if you want to be a plumber in Texas, you have to get a plumbing license. If you want to be an electrician, you have to get your electrician's license. If you want to be a hairdresser, you get your license. And one of the things that was unclear is whether or not non-citizens could get a license. And so we've had people who are not legally here in the United States getting licensed to compete for a particular job with a bunch of other citizens who have worked to get licensed for that job. And Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation just recently took actions to make sure that those who are licensed to engage in economic commerce in certain jobs that they regulate are indeed legally present here and ideally citizens. And this action has gotten the attention of the legacy media outlets. Now, one of the reasons Texas Scorecard and other groups have done so well is because the legacy media outlets are indeed enemies of the people. You know that. I know that. And I'm going to go to a recent news report that was done on TDLR, additional actions they took outside of the legal status requirement. But I want you to realize that these legacy media outlets will bend over backwards and actually finally try to act as investigative reporters, but only when acting on behalf of dangerous foreign actors who are trying to subvert our state. I want you to realize that the amount of effort they put into trying to expose TDLR's efforts as a negative, I think blew back on them. But this should both remind you of two things. One, there are some patriots in the state of Texas. These are individuals who were appointed by Governor Greg Abbott who are doing some great work at TDLR that you should be grateful for. And two, you should be reminded that, yes, the legacy media outlets out there are indeed the enemy of the people. And that is why we have to keep putting this information out to counter their narrative constantly. Let's go to this news story that ran on TDLR's recent actions. Just simply saying that they're no longer going to offer a licensing exam in Chinese.
In Texas, if you want to work as a massage therapist, you have to pass a state exam.
For just over 2 years, that test was offered in Chinese until the state suddenly pulled the plug. The agency in charge says it was to stop human trafficking, but advocates say the change feels discriminatory.
Here's what happened when 13 Investigates' Micah Hatfield went to get more clarity on the connection between the exam and human trafficking.
It started with the tip that Texas stopped offering the massage therapy licensing exam in Chinese. Why? For 5 months, 13 Investigates chased that answer. What we found is a state agency citing human trafficking to justify a move that critics say feels more like discrimination. And when we asked for the proof, they sent us numbers that left us scratching our heads and a bill for information we never got. The Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, or TDLR, is at the helm. Already, the exam to license new masseuses was offered in English and Spanish. In 2023, they added simplified Chinese after industry feedback, the agency says. By late 2025, it was gone. The agency's reasoning: they told us, quote, the data showed a disproportionate number of exams being administered in simplified Chinese that did not reflect the demographics of Texas massage students or licensees. They also said the Chinese exam had become, quote, a factor in schemes connected to human trafficking and organized criminal networks, saying that ending the exam was a necessary step to disrupt criminal networks.
It's really casting a wide net on a small group of people, and it's frankly unacceptable.
Of the Texas massage exam.
At a TDLR commissioners meeting, days before pulling the plug on the exam, the agency said it issued 26 emergency orders against illicit massage businesses across the state in a 6-month span of 2025.
We must balance the offering of language accommodations against the risks of enabling bad actors.
Data analyzed by 13 Investigates found that there are 34,000 people with active massage therapy licenses in Texas. Human trafficking is serious. We wanted to know how they made the connection between that and the Chinese exam. So we asked TDLR for the data. How many people are actually taking this exam? In 2025, out of nearly 6,000 exams, 3,700 were taken in Chinese. That's more than English and Spanish combined. Same with the year before. In an email TDLR sent to members of the massage industry, TDLR also cited another reason, claiming Texas had become a target for traffickers because 98% of out-of-state testers took the exam in Chinese. 98%? That sounds like a real problem until you look at the actual number of people. Yes, out-of-state exams are predominantly taken in simplified Chinese. But in 2025, 98% was just 33 people. The year before, only 10. We wanted to see the internal discussions leading to the decision. 13 Investigates filed a formal request for publicly available emails during a 2.5-month period mentioning the words Chinese and trafficking from their executive leadership team. At first, they asked us who we meant. This team on your website that includes the agency's chief of staff, who per her bio oversees the anti-human trafficking division. TDLR charged us $262. We paid it. 10 weeks later, they told us to ask for a refund. The TDLR claimed that in a 2.5-month period, every email sent to or from their 9-person executive leadership team mentioning those words is protected under attorney-client privilege, and they didn't turn over a single email. We filed a formal complaint with the Attorney General's office.
It is not illegal to be a massage therapist, and yet they're making it harder and harder for these folks that come here looking for a better life to be that and start working in a legal, lawful manner.
While the state fights to keep its internal discussions from us, the industry is feeling the squeeze. We spoke to a local spa manager who says his business is not involved in trafficking. He asked that we not show his face. He says for many immigrants, this is an entry-level job, a way to earn a paycheck. The technical language on the exam, he says, makes passing the test in English tough.
Now the average person can't pass this test, so they're not studying to be massage therapists. And if they aren't studying for the tests, we have no workers.
He says if these individuals spoke English well enough to take that version of the test, they would work in another industry. The spa he manages used to have up to 7 masseuses working, and now he says he's down to 2. He himself didn't plan to stay much longer.
Think about it. You work long hours, you don't get paid a lot, and you don't keep a high percentage of what you make. You often have to work 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., so it's hard.
We wanted to hone in on what TDLR says is happening in our community, so we sent them a list of pointed questions. They declined an on-camera interview, but told us in an email that, quote, their enforcement work has identified patterns of fraud and attempts to circumvent licensing requirements that are consistent with broader concerns related to labor exploitation and human trafficking.
God bless the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. These are the type of actions we want to see state agencies taking in order to combat and push back on all the foreign influence in our state. We want to encourage assimilation. If you want to come to the United States and succeed in this country, one of the things that you need to do is assimilate. You need to understand what has made our state great and what will continue to keep the state great. Part of that is our shared culture. It's our shared language. It's our shared values. And the reason that we have tensions rising in many respects is that you have individuals coming with zero intention of ever assimilating at all. And the government of the state of Texas has in the past taken some actions that have made that possible, that have even accommodated that desire. So what I see TDLR's actions as doing is reintroducing the value of assimilation to those individuals who want to engage in economic commerce in our state, because they're not just economic cogs in the wheel. They're part of the fabric of our state when they are living here, when they are legally present here, and when they are part of this state. Their children are in our school system. They might have a church that they're involved in. They could be active participants in the civic process. We need them to assimilate into Texas. One of the reasons Islam has become such an issue is because those radical Islamists who are coming to our state have zero intention of ever assimilating. They are here to conquer Texas for Muhammad. That's what they're here to do. So guess what? They're not here to learn what made Texas great. They're not here to understand the values that we hold. They want to take advantage of the state to benefit their conquest. They know that the countries that they came from only allow them to practice their faith. They know that the countries they came from will arrest someone for sharing the gospel. They will come to America and then say, religious freedom gives us the ability and total freedom to enact Sharia as many different places as we want. we have to push back. So I want y'all to see how all of these little battles are kind of intertwined. Now, one of the other things that happened last week was that Democrats were fined for breaking quorum. And that is a good thing. I wish they were fined more. One of the things that has definitely come to light and that everybody has, I think, admitted, even Republicans who are on the more moderate side have said these fines and penalties need to be more harsh. So I have seen a lot of justified criticism of the lack of strength in the fines and fees, but the General Investigating Committee did indeed vote to assess a little over $8,000 per member that they are not allowed to pay from their campaign account and has to come out of their state account or their personal account. And so they have those fines to pay. I wanted to take a step back to 2017. And we are going to go to a 3-minute exchange between then Representative Tony Tinderholt and then Speaker Joe Straus on quorum busting and whether or not we would punish Democrats for quorum busting. Let's go to this now almost decade-old clip.
Mr. Tinderholt, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Last night, can we get order for a moment, please?
House, come to order.
Last night I filed a House resolution, which does have a resolution number, House Resolution 35, Mr. Speaker. Its intent is to impose penalties on quorum busting. Are you aware that in 2003, Mr. Speaker, that the Democrats left the state in order to prevent us from conducting business?
Yes, Mr. Tinderholt, we've heard that.
And Mr. Speaker, yesterday during the Democrat press conference, they mentioned that there's only one bill that they have to take care of and then that they could potentially go home, yet there's 20 items on the call from the governor. I know that they're not on the books here yet, but are you aware of that as well, sir, that they said that in the press conference yesterday?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
Yesterday during the Democrat press conference, they mentioned that there's only one bill that they have to pass and then that they can go home. Are you aware that they said that in yesterday's press conference?
No, I didn't listen to the Democratic press conference.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are you also aware that this resolution was referred to a committee that has a Democrat chair, and this could potentially impact that individual who chairs that committee?
Mr. Tinderholt, our committees, the bill has been, or the resolution has been referred to the appropriate committee, and I'm sure the committee will handle it in the due course of their business.
Correct, well. Mr. Speaker. The final question I have is really concerning the movement of that resolution. We want to make sure that that resolution comes to the House floor so that the body can vote on it, because we're here and we're spending hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of taxpayer dollars to get the work of Texans done. And so if that doesn't work, I would ask in the rules, Mr. Speaker and parliamentarian, is there anything that we can do as a body to push and move that resolution if it gets stopped by that Democrat chairman?
Mr. Tinderholt, I'm sure there are ways to move the resolution.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think what I'm looking for is, are there specific ways, if that Democrat chairman stops that resolution in his or her committee and doesn't allow it to come to the floor, but we want to be able to vote on that resolution here to impose potential penalties for quorum breaking, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Tinderholt, I'm not sure that's a parliamentary inquiry. We'll deal with that hypothetical when we're faced with it.
I'll come down there and talk with the parliamentarian. Thank you,
okay,
Mr.
Thank you.
Here's what I want to at least recognize. The idea to punish Democrats who are breaking quorum did not come from anyone who is currently serving as a chairman in the Texas House. The idea of punishing quorum busting and penalizing Democrats is something that conservatives have been fighting for a decade. Now, should the fines be higher? Yes. Should the penalties be harsher? Yes. Will that be something conservatives push for next session? Yes. But 9 years ago, Tony Tinderholt was arguing with then Speaker Joe Strauss, who was one of the Democrats' strongest allies, trying and fighting and at least making sure that the people of Texas knew that somebody was trying to punish these Democrats and somebody was trying to set up the rules to encourage them to not break quorum in the future. They broke quorum even though we finally, this session for the first time ever, got quorum busting penalties in place. So now we've determined, well, the quorum busting penalties clearly weren't enough, so they need to be harsher and higher. We can work on that. It takes time to gain the victories that you're fighting to gain. It takes time to start fighting for something that 1 or 2 or 4 sessions later become a reality, and 1 or 2 sessions later get strengthened to actually accomplish more fully what you originally knew needed to happen. Reform takes time. And so this vote took place, and I recalled this exchange. I said, man, we've been fighting for this for a long time. And then just happened to find the clip. Actually, by happenstance, I was looking for something old on some of my files, and that's of course why I was scrolling back through even family pictures back in 2017, and that's when I saw this point of information or exchange between Tony Tinderholt and Joe Strauss. It was just on my computer, and I opened it up and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the exchange I was thinking about. And so I took that as kind of a clear reason to bring this into the show and for y'all to understand and at least appreciate the 9-year battle this has been. So the vote that took place last week, while still clearly lacking enough teeth, is still an accomplishment. Something that's been fought for a long time, and something that I'm grateful has finally come to this level of fruition in the state of Texas. Yes, there are other things going on, and we will continue to bring you updates on runoffs and convention and all of those things. But I wanted to give you these stories first and foremost as your update for the week. May God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Texas.